Hey everyone, Nick Marzinski here with TrappingLight.com, and in this video I'm going to address a question that a YouTube viewer asked about text layers. A few months ago I posted a video about how to use text layers in Photoshop, and I've included a link to that video tutorial both in my YouTube channel as well as my blog at TrappingLight.com. And this particular viewer wanted to know how to perform edits on multiple text layers. So, for example, let's say that we have a couple of text layers, two text layers. Is there a way that we can change the font or the font size or the color of those two text layers without having to go through the trouble of editing each one individually? And there is, and I'll get to it in a moment. But before I do that, and for reasons that will make sense in just a little bit, I want to talk about the toolbar here on the side of the screen, as well as the option menu up at the top of the screen. Now, if you don't see either of those, it's really easy to get them. You just activate them by going up here to Window and then selecting either Options or Tool, making sure that they're checked, and then they should appear in your workspace here. And the reason why these two toolbars are important is because they work in tandem. And by that I mean that whichever tool I have selected on the toolbar on the left will determine what I see up on the option menu up top. So for example, right now I've got the Move tool selected, this top tool, and what I've got up here is I've got all of my alignment options that would be available. If I switch to something like the marquee tools or the lasso tools, then all of a sudden I have options about feathering and about making a new selection. And that's all based off of the fact that these are tools, the marquee tool and the lasso tools are tools that you would use to make a selection within Photoshop. So every single tool that I click on, you can see up top, will change what options I have up on the options menu. So when I come down to the text layer here, you can see that it's giving me options for things like font, for whether or not I want it regular or bold or italic, the font size. This box here that's black is for the color of the font. All that sort of stuff is font and text related options. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because whenever we're making changes to text, such as changes to the font or the color changes, this text tool here needs to be selected, or otherwise we won't be able to have any of these options here and we won't be able to make those changes. Fortunately, Photoshop makes this really easy for us, and I'll show you how. I'm going to enable these two text layers here that I've already created. This is basically the question that they ask. Can you do a tutorial where you play with the colors in your text, and do you have to color each layer as you go along, or can you do it at the end? Now, I've made them as two separate layers here that you can see in my layer stack. And the way to easily select your text and start and get to the text tool, let's say that I'm using the Move tool right up here. If I want to switch to the text tool and I want to make a change to this layer right here, all I have to do is click on this T icon in the layer stack. Double click on it, and immediately what happens is that Photoshop highlights all of the text in that layer and immediately selects the text tool, and I've got all of these options up top. So if I want to make changes just to this particular text layer, all I've got to do is go right up there, and then if I want to make a change to the color, I just make a change to the color and then click the checkbox to approve the change, and that's it, I'm done. If I want to make another change to this lower text box here, I can do the same thing, double click on the T, come up here and change my color to something else, and then approve the change. And that works, and that's okay, but the problem is that it's a whole bunch of steps, okay? And what I want to do is I want to come up with a way that I can do all this stuff without having to go through selecting each layer and making changes to each layer and trying to find the exact same color that I used up on this top text layer as I used below. You can see that the color here of red is just a shade off. So is there a way in Photoshop that we can actually make these changes to a text layer, to multiple text layers at the same time by selecting both of them? And it's really easy to do. Again, all we have to do is simply hold down the Shift key when I'm selecting layers, and then I can select multiple layers. So you can see in my layer stack here, now I've got both layers selected, and Photoshop has drawn a box around both layers, which implies that they're both selected. Now, if you look up at the options menu up here, I don't have any options related to text. And this is what I was talking about when I said that the toolbar here and the options menu up here work together. In order to get those options for text that I need to either click on this text tool or hit T on my keyboard to bring it up. At that point, now I can make whatever text related changes I want, and because both of these layers here in my layer stack are highlighted, the same change is going to be made to both. If I want to change the color, for example, I can come right up here. Now, you'll see up here that Photoshop has a white box with a question mark in it. And this is Photoshop's way of telling me, look, this is how you change the color, but these two text layers here have slightly different colors, and so I'm going to just give you a question mark because I can't tell you what color it is. Well, if we want to change both of these text layers to the same color, we've selected them, we've got the type tool selected, we just click in here, and if I want to change them both to say blue, click shade of blue, click OK, and there you go, they're both changed. But I can also make other changes. So if I want to change the font size, I can come up to the font, to the size selection here and say make the font smaller, make the font larger, whatever I want to do, and Photoshop, since both text layers are selected, will make the change to both of them. In the same way, I can change the font and go through and see how it looks with different kinds of font, all with having both layers selected. And I think I had that on Minion before, so let's go back to that. Maybe it was Myriad. I think it was Myriad. So that's how to do edits on multiple text layers at the same time. Now, here's another idea that I want you to kind of think about. Let's say that we want to add a gradient to our text. So we want to make our text appear as though it's shading from one color to another. Now, in the last tutorial that I recorded on text layers, I said you can do this, and the way that you do it is to click on your text layer, right click on it, and then click rasterize text, rasterize type. At that point, the text, you can't edit it anymore. Once you rasterize it, it's no longer text, it's now converted to pixels. And then you can use the gradient tool to make a gradient change to it. And that works, but that works fine for one layer. But here we've got two different text layers. And let's say that we want to add a gradient to those two layers and have the gradient be the same for both layers. So let's just make a gradient real quick. I've got a blank layer here that I selected by choosing the new layer button. I'm going to go to my gradient tool over here and click on the gradient editor, and this white or this red to yellow looks pretty good, so I'll just say OK. And then I just have to draw my line. I'm holding down the shift key to keep it straight up and down, and there I go, I've got my gradient. Now what I want to do is I want this gradient to show with these text layers here. So right now, if what I want is I want this text layer to start at red and then shade to kind of an orange, and then I want this text layer to pick up where that one left off with the orange and then shade to sort of a yellow. And I've got my gradient here that I can use, but I need a way to be able to link these two text layers to this gradient. And one way to do that is with the clipping mask. So I can turn my gradient on and I can clip it to the layer below it by holding Control, Alt, and G, and that will clip it. So you can see that there's now this little arrow here. And that's fine, and you can see that now all of a sudden this text layer has that gradient in there. So it's shading from red to orange. And so I've got the gradient on this first layer. Now I want to get it on the second layer. Well, I could try and do the same thing here where I select this layer and then Control, Alt, and G, but that doesn't work. Now all of a sudden what's happened is that I've now hidden the layer on the bottom, and I've only got this layer up on top. So that's clearly not working. So I'm going to undo that. So at this point, what I need to do is I need to actually group both of these text layers and make them a single, not a single text layer exactly, but a group of layers that I can represent as sort of a single layer for the purposes of clipping. And the way to do that, first of all, I'm going to turn this clipping mask off. And I'm going to turn it off so you can see the text. I'm going to select both text layers like this, and I'm going to drag them down to this folder here. In this folder, you can see it says create a new group. If I do that, then what I get is I get these two text layers, but instead of having them be two independent layers, I've linked them together as a group. And now that I've done that, I can take this gradient that I have here and Control-Alt-G to create a clipping mask. And now this gradient that I've created here is now clipped to these two text layers. So now instead of having it just clip to one where it was you see the gradient on only one at a time, now I can get it so that you see the gradient on both of them. The other great thing about this is that I didn't have to rasterize my text to do this. I still get the gradient, but I don't have to, I still also am able to edit my text. So if I want to edit my text and make a change to the type, let's say that there's a typo, I can come in here, double click on it, and make my change and then approve my change, and it's continuously re-editable. And so those are just a few additional tricks that I wanted to share with regards to type layers. Actually, there's one more change that I want to make, and that's to both of them. So I'm going to select both of my type layers, and at this point I should point out that this edit that I'm going to be making now, if you're using Photoshop Elements doesn't have a text panel or a character panel like this, and so you're not going to be able to make these changes. These are changes that you can make only within the full version of Photoshop, either Creative Suite or Creative Cloud. But it's kind of an aesthetic sort of thing. What I'm going to do for both of these, and what I want to do is I want to actually adjust the tracking, which is the space between the letters in these two text layers. Right now, even though you don't necessarily notice it, it seems a little bit wide to me. And so what I want to do is I want to just tighten it up a little bit. Say, let's try -25. That looks pretty good. Let's see if we can go to -50. That, I think, looks even better. I just want to simply tighten up that text because the way it was originally when it's set to 0 is just, there's these huge gaps between the letters, and I want to minimize that to the extent that I can. So by selecting both layers and then coming up here to my character panel and making the change to this tracking box here, that allows me to bunch the text up to make it look just that much more aesthetically pleasing or professional, I guess. So that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial on text layers for the person that asked this question on the YouTube channel. I hope this answers your question. If anybody else has any other questions on text layers or any other ideas for tutorials that you'd like to see, please feel free to leave them either in the comment section of my YouTube channel or on my blog at trappinglight.com. My name again, Nick Marzinski. Thanks for watching.